Good morning, Melee community on the West Coast. Good afternoon, Melee community on the East Coast. Good evening, Melee community in Europe. And good night, Melee community in Asia. It's day 3, and hopefully by now, you know me. I'm Kevin Dhir, your host for the Good Morning Melee Show, and I'll be bringing you information about today's event schedule, our donation incentives for the day, and I'll be leading you into a special event in lieu of a guest interview for the day. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to the 5 Days of Melee. This is a community-driven event where members of the Super Smash Bros. Melee community have come together to bring 108 hours of content to the world. From panels with community members to action-packed top-level gameplay, we've got so much prepared for you. The event will be leading into the Ludwig Ågren Championship Series Finals, so there's even more Melee content ahead. Step aside, Christmas. The 5 Days of Melee may just be taking your place as December's largest holiday, especially when you look at how many gifts the community has been handing out. On the 3rd day of Melee, the community gave to me Melee Jeopardy! Tune in this afternoon for another episode of Melee Jeopardy! With some beloved community members. As I mentioned earlier, we won't be having a guest interview on the show today. Instead, I'll be handing it off to Scar and Toph for a special edition of their show. You can donate through Tiltify to ask them any questions you'd like to. Following that, Fuzziness and Shillendude are going to be hosting the Team Liquid speedrunning block. After Melee Jeopardy, we'll be having another daily panel. This time, it'll be hosted by The Cheat, and it'll be featuring some of my favorite Melee content creators, Hugs86, Awesome Sauce, Turn Down for Walt, and Dark Genex. In the evening, we'll be kicking off the North American Open, an LACS qualifier event. That'll lead into the Alston Melee Wrap-Up, a live podcast from the great crew at Alston Melee. Another donation incentive will allow you to ask them questions too, so check out !donate for more information. Tonight's social gaming event will be some great personalities in our community playing Scribble.io, which is basically Pictionary. We'll end the night off again with some historical moments watching Grand Finals through time. Type !schedule for the full schedule. It's only day 3, but we've been making some amazing progress towards our $50,000 donation goal for Direct Relief. Direct Relief is a humanitarian aid organization that has been making an incredible impact supporting healthcare workers to protect us from COVID-19. The money makes a huge difference and a huge impact. We're proud to be supporting them. Every and any donation makes a difference, but if you can't donate directly, that's okay too. Promoting the event and sharing it helps our cause a ton. Remember folks, please stay safe in these difficult times. Avoid any non-essential travel, and please wear a mask. Alright, that's all I've got for today. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Good Morning Melee Show, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, we got Dhir, we got what's up, dude? We got some interview questions, don't we?
Hey, yeah, we do. Hey, how's it going? Happy to be joining y'all both. PP, we haven't really properly met before, but I'm Dhir. I'm the host of the Good Morning Melee Show. I've been around the community for the past 5-6 years, tournament organizing out in British Columbia, Canada. We've talked in passing, and I'm a member of the fellow Kevin Club, so yeah.
Hey, all right. Kevin. Well, hey, you could have that's all you needed to say, man. What's up, man?
Exactly. Kevin to Kevin. And so super excited to chat with you again. Always been a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll just jump right in. So PP, as you took a break from the community and competition, did you feel that you got to get an external perspective on the Smash community and on Melee? And during that time, and as you had that perspective, were there any big realizations or new observations? Because when you're so in it, when you're grinding every day, when you're competing, watching Melee, you're so immersed. But when you step back, how'd that change Melee for you?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, fantastically worded question. I love that a lot. And it's very interesting if you watch the doc. It's not perfectly clear at all times, but there were periods where I was already like in and out, and I was really struggling to adapt to the esports level of attendance. I was still stuck in a pattern of every few months attendance from the previous era, which was its own thing, and that's something like talk about that more. But that's not really your question. Your question was the outside perspective, and I think even then, there's something very different to be more on the outside of it, and it's very interesting because I think I did end up getting like a very unique perspective. I mean, what is the Melee community more like from the outside? And let's see, what can I say that's like really interesting about that? And I could say that I learned a lot less about like when you're in it, there's so many things you learn about the people individually. There's so many things that like will get passed off to you about the game. Like when you're in that space, like stuff is kind of coming to you like all the
Mhm.
time, and it's not even stuff you're necessarily asking for it, but it's just there, and so it's very interesting. And so I'd say probably the biggest change of perspective is kind of seeing things that top players are doing or seeing the ways they might be reacting to something, and then suddenly being at a point where I can say I can guess why that might be the case, but I no longer know. And I think that that's really good to help me identify with more of the players and the fans that are watching from the outside, because they're saying, okay, well, I'm not sure why someone's doing this, and a lot of people will jump to an immediate conclusion, and I know people are often so complicated and they have reasons for things that I don't think that is necessarily the best strategy, but I understand certainly now why that can make sense a lot of the time. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing is it gave me a lot more perspective of a lot of the viewers and fans on the outside is probably the biggest change. I'm sure there are other things. It's a great question. I'd have to probably think about that more to give you a better answer, but that's probably the biggest thing.
Wow, that's a
Really?
good answer.
Thank you.
Toph, I don't know, Toph, I don't know how many times in the past couple of years you yourself have taken breaks from Melee, because for as long as I can remember and as long as I've been in the community, you've been up there, right? But have you had the chance at all to like reflect and consider your involvement in the community and look at it
All
from
the
the
time.
outside perspective at all? And yeah, what are your takes on our community from an outside perspective?
All the time. No, all the time. I mean, it's been a struggle. Like, okay, this year was the first year since 2013 I haven't had a full-time engineering job, right? Like
Right.
I quit to be a full-time streamer and content creator. I want to see how far I can push this,
Mhm.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. That means a
It's
lot.
huge.
And yeah, no, for me, like it's always been a struggle of like, so I've always been at least tangentially involved. I think I always will, but there have been definitely periods where I've felt more as like an outsider. Like I think I've kind of talked about this with Bobby. Like it's, because you get as like just a commentator, there's a lot of
Mhm.
those just a commentator memes, and you reach a point where it's like, I feel like I need to be a certain skill level and like uphold a certain standard of like play to like remain relevant in a weird way, or like people
Mhm.
won't give you that level of respect for the things you say or the analysis you bring to the table anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and I haven't always been able to do that. Fortunately, in 2020, and especially with COVID, I feel like my level of play has been pretty good, and I am excited to enter LACS qualifiers later today actually. But
Let's go, Toto.
thank you, but yeah, it's I mean, I think I will probably always be part of the Melee community to a certain degree. Like I love commentating. I love talking about the game. I am currently really having a good time with creating content and streaming and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of had different takes on. I've had to evaluate like where my place in terms of what can I bring to the table when we started doing the Scarlet Toph show, the reads, things like that. It's like, okay, what can I do with my place in the community at the time, with the job I have, with the amount of hours a week I can do? What can I do that's best for the scene and that people would like, right? And that's where we got the idea for the reads. It's like, okay, we can record the reads once a month and we can put out a video once a week, and it's good content for YouTube. And that made a lot of sense at the time. And yeah, me and Bobby in particular, we make decisions like that all the time. It's like, what given our time constraints and life constraints, like what makes the most sense for us right now? All the time. But I will always probably be around in some capacity. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just it's kind of part of my Smash Community's family at this point.
Awesome. It's 2020 and Melee is so much different than it was in 2018, 2019, 2015, and it's honestly just been evolving, both the technology in-game and out of game. Out of game, Slippy being so huge, and in-game, the stuff people are implementing in their gameplay today versus, my girlfriend and I were watching the Apex 2015 set between you and Leffen, last night, and the game just even looks so different back then. I mean, sure, there's a lot of similarities, but seeing gameplay from today, PP Toph, relative to
5 years ago or a couple of years ago, what are the biggest in-game, advancements that you can comment on as like, holy crap, I never thought people would be doing this stuff on the reg. Just like today we're playing Slippy online, we're playing Melee from the comfort of our homes. Yeah, what are those shockers for you in-game that players today might just take as like, yeah, that's the norm?
PB, you take this first.
I'll go first then.
I buy a little take on it.
Sure. I think the biggest change. I mean, there are various things that you can say have changed, but I've been asked this a few times. I really do think the biggest changes are a lot of the things that have come from the uncle punches and a bit of the 20xx's as well. I mean, I think those have filtered through every single level of play. I'm thinking primarily of a lot of the edge mechanics. I'm thinking of the SDI. I'm thinking of teching. We're seeing so much with OMSA teching and all that stuff as well. I really do. I think that those are the biggest changes. Sure, there are other things, but like, and there are some counter forces that are going against it. There are some tactics that are able to mitigate some of the SDIs and some of the techs and everything. But still, I would say that force of all of that is much more prevalent than anything else that I've noticed. And it's very interesting because when you do hit someone and it would work a certain way, a few years ago, and you're like, okay, well, they're just I think Mars Sheik is a very interesting example for it, because there are so many times where you up throw and then the Sheik is there and then you could always get the up tilt, but then they go just a little bit farther than you can get the follow up. And it used to be like, oh, this is not too bad, it's pretty guaranteed. And now you have to say, okay, no, it's more complicated now. But then if they mess it up, then it is the way it was. So combo trees are much more complicated now, because of a lot of that.
Mars Sheik is that's a really good example, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Actually, kind of on both sides. Because I was even watching like some of Leffen's Sheik stuff against Marth, where he's doing like rising, like short up air, like rising short up air. I remember Kirby Cosme being a huge evangelist of that combo option back in the day. But
Sheiks have been talking about that for years, and Leffen, a lot of it is, I think it's just so hard to get that because it's a very tight reaction. But if someone's going to do it, it would be Leffen.
It would be Leffen. Yeah, he's got really optimal combos in that matchup.
That is kind of crazy. Yeah, the idea that combo trees themselves and whatnot are changing because players are able to DI them better, SDI them better. I mean, even Ken combos, I don't see them that often these days. And pillaring, I know MDZ was mentioning in chat the other day, he doesn't really see people talk about pillaring these days because you can't do that consistently on somebody who's good now, right?
Look at Wizrobe teleport across the freaking level, man. What are you?
Yeah, it's insane. No, the crazy one I remember that Mango Wizzy stock. That's a good, there was that stock where it looked like Wizard was like getting 2 smash inputs on every foul quit, and Mango still comboed him to death. And I was like, Jesus, like he's actually following up the SDI so well. Yeah. And then, no, but that's a really good point. Spacey Dittos too. Like I was thinking of there was a period like 2016, 2015, 2016, where like it really felt like, oh, the platform tech chase flowchart in the Fox Ditto, for example, or Fox Falco is figured out. Like it looked like KJH, Armada, Leffen, but then, like I was talking to Drud Fox like this year about it, right? And he was like, yeah, I'll play Pengi and Fox Dittos and I'll get the up throw on the platform. But he knows I want to go for rising up air there, so he'll deliberately miss the tech and then he'll smash the first to the up air, and the second it won't connect. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. You could do that. And I was just like, and a lot of the situations where people thought you had to guarantee landing up air, cover all options. People are purposely DIing to tech to a certain part of the platform where you still have a mix up, for example, things like that. That's a really good example. I also think, it's funny just in terms of, things in general that I think are just becoming way more prevalent that I didn't think everyone would be doing. Like things like crouch tech chasing are way, way, way more common. Like I was even playing like Switch in PM and he was going for crouch tech chases. And I was like, all right, the PM boys are even on it. All right, that makes sense.
Everyone's in on it.
Everyone's in on it. On the flip side of things that you might have thought, maybe if you're in 2016, you're like, what do you think 2020 Melee is going to be like? The funny thing is people still drop tech chases all the time.
Tech chasing is really hard.
It's so hard. I actually think it's one of the happiest accidents. We always talk about how Melee is full of happy accidents. It's game design. I love, from a game design perspective, that reaction tech chasing is on the border of humanly possible. If it was slightly easier, everyone would get it every time. If it was slightly harder, you could never do it, and you'd have to guess every time, or you'd have to make more reads and stuff like that. I love that it's this like, are you playing hot? Because if so, you can do it, and if not, you can't. I love that.
I love that it changes by percent, because it
Right.
is insane low percent, and then there's a certain threshold, and then you've got to know that, and then can you get away with this extra pummel to try and get like there's so many things that you could. It's very neat how people evaluate that. It's very cool, and I like that still exists. I like that that because really I like the interaction of it. How hard do you want to make it for the other person? How well do you know it from both ends? Face Roll did an interview, and he said something that kind of made my stomach turn, and I think the stomachs of the Falcos that were in the call with him turned. I think it was Bird Call, and he said Falcos really need to practice shining on their first frame when they get out of the tech animation. And I think it was Squid and I believe Ginger, and I think they said the same thing I did. We all had the same reaction, like that's so boring. but if you learn to do it right, like it makes it so much more interactive and interesting, because then the Sheiks have to have even more tightness, precision. So they have to change the way that they cover things at different percents. And so I think there is still room for interaction and innovation.
Wow. Yeah, because from your perspective, you're like, man, I don't want to hear that, but he's right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, what are you gonna do? Like, I don't like he's not wrong.
Wow.
It's a very interesting thing, but it's just something that, like, as a player, these are all the aspects of the game I've not cared as much about. It just honestly I haven't, because I want to do the neutral interaction. And then I want to hit them, and I care about how hard I hit them. And if they hit me, it's like, well, I shouldn't have got hit. That's how I've always viewed things. But like this all this stuff that's changing is good for me, right? This irons out a lot of my game, and so I think it's really cool that that's such a focus.
While we're on the topic of the game advancing and the meta changing, I'm gonna pull in a donation question from Cumpy. Cumpy has been a strong donator all week, so huge shout outs to Cump. He's donated another $100 to ask this question, and the question is: with the modern advent of things like Frozen Stadium becoming a competitive standard, can you see a future where further changes to the vanilla game are made for the sake of game balance, more stage balance or customization, character rebalancing? We already have wobbling being banned. I can see things like bans in best of fives and stuff like that. Yeah, what are your guys' takes on this kind of stuff?
Well, I answered first last time. You want to take it, Toph?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I thought about this because it's like, I mean, okay, I'll just tear the Band-Aid off. Like, I feel like for a lot of this stuff, the first question is like, how does that work with Nintendo? Like, I feel like that's the first thing, right? Yeah. Like, I don't know. It's like, if we put, like, okay, we've already got some dope stages. Like, if you got like 20XX, there's like, you could play on a Nintendo GameCube. I don't know if you guys, it's basically FD, but it's like a Nintendo game. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. There's some cool stages in there already. I remember Mango used to have on his stream. He'd play on that. It's like Green Greens, but like it's basically just like platform. And that's actually a pretty cool
Green
stage.
Greens. Yeah.
I would love to see more. Honestly, it'd be cool to have a bigger stage list. That's the first place my mind goes, is like, it'd be cool to have a couple more like neutral stages, because like there's some cool, like Frozen Stadium obviously.
We could pull archetypes from like even Ultimate and stuff, right? Like Smashville and Melee would be really fun, and Smashville being a huge one in both those games.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great example. I think we could definitely do it. I don't know. This is honestly outside of the realm of like my understanding of how our relationship with Nintendo works. Probably a TO could chime in better. Like, for me, I'm just like, if that's on stream, does it make it? But dude, we've been running like since Apex 20. I was looking at some of the footage with PP playing, and then he had the EG PPMD tag with more than 4 letters. Yeah. That's modded. That's a clear visual mod from what Nintendo let us do with the vanilla game.
Evo as well.
Yeah, like we did that at Evo. That was like 2014. So we've been running visually obvious mods on the main stage of major tournaments for a very long time. So maybe it's fine.
Stop us at, I think it was that beast that was actually featured in the documentary, the one in 2015.
Oh, really? Yeah.
There was going to be a Cloud9 Mango Fox, and I think there was going to be a Peach skin for Armada.
Wow.
And I think Nintendo shut that down.
Really?
Or at least the fear of Nintendo, if not Nintendo directly themselves. But I can imagine that.
I know it was planned, and I do believe Nintendo, I think, caught wind of it or something. And
wow. Fascinating.
Yikes.
So
Yeah, I don't know,
they've
man.
been great for years. That's why I'm so glad we're doing 5 days of Melee, so we can. This is the time to talk about this, right?
Yeah.
But do you mind if I take the answer?
No, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
That's all I want to say.
Yeah, I think that because I've been thinking about this some because people ask this question to me occasionally, and I think it's very interesting that when a lot of these things started becoming more possible to consider to people with quarantine, with everyone just playing on Slippy, because it's like, well, we're clearly not getting a Nintendo partnership now, right? Like, and Stadium is a little different, and everything, and so that's. I think the longer this goes on, I think there's going to be more people pushing for this, and I think like it's very interesting because in the past, right? Like especially in the first documentary, there was so much talk about how the rule set changed and how
Mhm.
East Coast had one rule set, West Coast had a rule set, right?
Mhm,
And then
mhm.
eventually they settled, and then but then like even now, not all of Europe is even playing NTSC. Like it's taken a really long time, and even over the past few years, Europe's talked about that. There was, but basically, we have one rule set for everyone now, and that was not something we had back in the day. And part of the reason for that was, sure, you could say isolation for some scenes, but part of it also was that TOs were willing to experiment. There was a willing discussion among TOs that said, let's try different stuff and let's see what people like, and then if we think it's healthy for the game, we can do that, or we think it's good, then we'll do that. And I think over time, with just people being more connected and everything like that, I think that went away. But it would be interesting, and I've talked about this a few times, and I think there may have been some results from it, but it would be interesting if there's just like there's a swell of people that want certain things a certain way, and we're like, well, it's like we're not partnering with Nintendo, so maybe we're able to experiment. Will
Mhm.
TOs eventually start trying to do that?
Mhm.
Will they start trying to add in stages? Will they start trying to have modded skins in games to like the Cloud9, Mango, Fox, or Falco? Like there are possibilities there, and
Yep.
I'm not really advocating one way or the other, because what do we do post quarantine? Then like people are going to say, well, now we don't have weird green greens anymore, and I really like weird green greens. That's my best level. I'm not really advocating one way or the other, but I'm
Mhm.
saying I think the longer this goes, I think the greater a possibility for movements like that could happen. And I don't try to say like which way I think would be good. I just sort of say that I see that as a possibility.
Gotcha.
Yeah. In particular in the Slippy era.
Yes.
Yeah.
PP, you brought up a really good point that a lot of TOs like myself have been talking about, is how we're going to adapt once offline events come back,
Mm,
because there's been a huge change in the way people even play Melee today and the way people are involved in the Melee community, because they can play such good quality Melee from the comforts of their own home.
yes.
How do you both see the community adapting and responding once offline events do come back? What is going to be the main value and pull of offline events, and how are offline events going to be able to compete with the experience that you can get from home? And what are the big things that you'd like to see offline events change to, embrace these new players or compete better against Slippy?
I can go first if you want, but
Yeah. No, sure.
I just okay.
Absolutely.
I know this just talked for a while, so I didn't want to monopolize.
No. Yeah, we'll take turns on who goes first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So um, I think this was something very interesting about the most recent documentary. Actually, I got a decent amount of people coming in and saying, "Wow, I really remembered how great in-person tournaments were and looked." And so I think there's a simple force that is working in the favor of TOs, which is the reminder through things like the documentary. I would also say that th- what the documentary shows is one of your best weapons, if you will, best
Mhm.
arguments. However, the energy that you get there, and I was very thrilled to experience this from the outside, pretty much the first time, maybe ever, or at least in years, at uh, the Genesis this year, because I made
Yep.
sure to sit in the crowd to watch, because I've never been in esports city. I've always been on the other side, and I was like, wow, let's see what this is like. And it's very interesting. The energy in that room, I don't care how hyped the chat's getting. I don't care if if your whole family and your dog are yelling and barking. nothing is comparable to being there.
Yep.
And yes, not
I agree.
everyone can go anyway. Sure, that's fair, but locals can have that. I mean, here in North Carolina, we can get really hype. We'll hype random pool sets because we just think it's fun.
Yep.
Like two people that
Yeah,
have never played
yeah.
before, day one people, we'll just go, woo! And like every they just start dropping combos, and then we just yell more. Like it's just a fun experience that you can't get online, and so much of what the community is built on is that in-person connection. In the first documentary, I don't know how much was made of that, when like, oh, so much computer games that we don't have that, but now we do, right? But I still think that we can still, like, those are still our roots. Those are still where I think all the connections are. And if you want to be that type of player, if you want to, there are certain players that'll probably say, "Well, you're not dealing with the crowd if you're online, and you're not dealing with what your opponent's reaction to things might be, and them being right beside you, and all of these other things that we can argue if we wanted to about being interesting skills to test. And as for what TOs can do, which I thought was a really interesting question, um, I think, and this was something that was getting discussed even before Slippy, which was really interesting. There was an experiment that I listened to. There was a podcast, and I think this was something that Sheridan started with right after he moved to the Pacific Northwest, if I'm not mistaken. There was some type of like ladder, I think, system or something. Maybe ladder's not the right word, but there were almost like crews of people, and these crews of people had like a top player head of them, and the top player was incentivized in a certain way to work with them, to train them, and then they all trained each other because it was benefiting, because everyone, when they all played after a while, or they played certain periods of time over a season, like everyone's results were weighted equally, and then at the end there'd be a certain monetary amount too. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to do because it forged some friendships. It caused top players to spend more time training newer players. I thought that was a really interesting idea. And I'm not saying that's something you have to do at all. There can be other things that you could have a movie night after a tournament, like, whatever, like it does. Everyone is going to have their own vision, but whatever you could do to capitalize on that, any type of other event, even if you just run weird side events, like people were asking me the other day, like, oh, why aren't there low tier tourneys anymore? Like, run low tier tourneys, like $1 entry or free or whatever. I think people like doing that, and think that's interesting to watch on stream. And so there are all kinds of things you can do in or out of the game that can grab people and bring them in and give them something that they wouldn't get otherwise. And I think if you do it, it doesn't even have to be a major investment, but if you do that kind of stuff enough and people hear about it that are around, they're gonna be like, well, I want to check that out. I mean, and at that moment, I think they can be hooked.
Cool. And yep, that answers it super well. Toph, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that? Or
No, I was gonna say I think the first couple, like I think the first IRL major in particular, that like once the people are vaccinated and stuff like that, we can have one. Like,
Yep.
I think it's gonna be fucking. People are gonna. I think people miss offline.
I'm
I
so
think people
fucking
miss it a lot.
excited.
I think
so
people are
fucking
excited. Yeah, I remember. I love that you said that you were in the crowd because I had this exact revelation that it was one of the tournaments in NorCal where it was somehow Mango Armada finals. I think it was I'm Not Yelling. I think it was I'm Not Yelling. And
What a name of an event.
yeah, what a name of an event. And it was and I was a lot of the time, I'm either commentating. If I'm not commentating, I'm like walking around or whatever. But yeah, I was like hanging out in the crowd, and I was like, dude, I really miss being a crowd monster. There's something about being a crowd monster that's very different from being anything else, like Twitch monster, like that.
Yeah,
And,
I honestly, the people who are sitting at home playing Slippy all day, saying that they don't want to deal with all the BS that comes with having to go in person to an event, like I think those people, once they actually sit in an actual event and feel those kind of feelings, they're just gonna be turned entirely. So I'm so excited for those people to realize as
that's
well.
what everyone was saying when they saw, like that was the best part of like, all the footage we saw from metagame of like these big tournaments. It's like, man, I think I speak for a lot of us. We're like, damn, we miss this.
Yeah,
This
I
was
mean, this
cool.
whole week has been great for that, for me at least, to like relive and rekindle those feelings from being at an in-person event. All right, I've just got one last question before we wrap off. We're
okay,
running
sure.
low on time. Describe Melee to you in 3 words.
3 words.
Or 3 words that come to your mind about Melee that like capture it for you.
Dance, conversation, or
Oh fuck. Oh shit.
Dude, when he does something so good like that, it's hard.
Oh fuck. Oh shit. Crouch, cancel, grab.
Hey,
Sounds
well,
good.
you gotta acknowledge when you get one up.
I gotta give the other perspective. I gotta give the other perspective. But isn't that what's so wonderful about it?
It's so cool because there's so many different spectrums. Thank you guys so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Had a great time talking to both of you. We've got some more segments and amazing Melee content up for the rest of the day. So gonna sign off the Good Morning Melee show.
You guys.
Peace.